Actually, all of my talented classmates went on to become engineers and lawyers and doctors. And I think some of them would have been incredible artists, but they never had the opportunity. I was one of the few who just said, okay.
Hi, welcome to Swishing Mindsets. Today we are delving into creative inspiration and its process with Stan Lai, hailed as a major contemporary Asian playwright of his time, perhaps of all time. Born in America, raised in Taiwan with a career spanning the Chinese diaspora, Lai believes that we are all born creative, but the source to creativity has been blocked by life. He is also an award-winning filmmaker and longtime educator with a PhD from Berkeley. His book on creativity, which has sold 1 million copies in the Chinese language, is being published in English under the name Creativitry. Hi, Lai.
Hey, how are you, Anuradha?
Hi, Stan,
It's
I
good
should say,
to,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You can say Lai, but you would say Lai Shenchuan. That's my Chinese name.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay. So
right.
Stan
But
is
Stan
easier.
is fine. Stan is
Stan,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
So, why Creativitry? Have I got it right? Is that how you say it?
Yes, you got it right. Creativity. It's a word I made up actually,
Okay.
because for the Chinese version of the book, which was published in 2006, I made up a word meaning like the study of creativity. It's like create. Maybe a more accurate translation would be creativology or something like that. But I thought that was too awkward a word in English, so I made the word creativity, and I explain it in the frontispiece of the book, saying that creativity is a word that did not exist until it did, like all creative things. They don't exist until they are, and it rhymes with chemistry, sorcery, artistry, and it is the know-how of creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Very fitting, to have a creative spin for a book on creativity. Wonderful.
Right.
So, Stan,
Yes,
I
yes.
want to start by, getting to know you better and even for the
Mm-hmm.
audience, whoever's listening in.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
like your career and your life really has spanned, the
Mm-hmm.
US, Taiwan,
Mm-hmm.
China. So
Mm-hmm.
could you talk a
Mm-hmm.
little bit in brief? I know it's a long life and, there's so much you've seen,
Thank you.
but
Right.
just in brief and how it's influenced you really. And, you've written, I think,
Right.
more than 40 plays or something, so a little
Yes,
bit about how
yes,
it's all
yes.
influenced you.
Sure. Well, I was born in America. My father was a diplomat, and then he was working for the nationalist government. I don't know if in India you're familiar with that, because in 1949 the communists took over China, and then the nationalist government went to Taiwan. So I grew up in America and in Taiwan, and received my education in both places. And then I went back to America to study theater for reasons unknown, because it's very mysterious. Because in Taiwan there was no theater industry. In other words, we didn't have a commercial theater. It was like, what are you studying theater for if there's no theater groups, there's no actors, there's no directors or playwrights. But that's what I did. That's what I felt I should do. So at Berkeley, I got a PhD, and the PhD was basically an academic PhD, but also I was trained as a director, not as a playwright. But when I went back to Taiwan to teach, and this is 1983, then I found that there were no teaching materials for my students at this new school called the National Institute of the Arts. And I'm supposed to teach like acting and then history of Western theater. And you need scripts, right? You need text to be able to teach these things. You can't just tell stories in class. And if you're teaching acting, you definitely need a script for the actors to act. So I was really put on the spot, and I started translating like crazy, because I am bilingual, English and Chinese. But I felt, in those days in fact there was no computers. They were just starting word processing and everything. So I had to write everything by hand, from English to Chinese, and all. It's crazy. I could never catch up to all the work I needed to do. So it came to a point where I said, okay, this is not going to work. And so what can possibly work is if I change my whole system and throw away basically most of the things I learned in the West and get back to something very basic, which is an actor and the space, and working with their stories. So these young college students who, it may sound absurd, but they fought like for everything to get into the school, but many of them had never seen a play. It was that kind. That's the history of Taiwan. Is that for many years the government suppressed creativity and all of the creative arts, and so there weren't many artists. And actually all of my talented classmates went on to become engineers and lawyers and doctors, and I think some of them would have been incredible artists, but they never had the opportunity. I was one of the few who just said, okay, what the hell, let's try this. And so in the end, I started building plays, like devising scripts with my actors through a technique called improvisation, and then performing these scenes, which I had edited into a whole play for a public audience, which was part of my job description. That's what they wanted me to do. And it turned out that from my very first play, audiences were very receptive. And the art community in Taiwan really gathered together and said, wow, this is something new. This is something interesting. Let's go with it. And so suddenly we had a community of, if you know anything about, if you're interested in Taiwan, the arts of Taiwan in the 80s, what happened, there was this one incredible movement called the new wave film industry. So Hou Xiaoxian and Edward Young, people like that, they were making films at the same time. I was starting out making theater plays, and they often came to my rehearsals, and I'm going, wow, what are they doing here? And actually, they're raiding my actors, and so because everyone wants to get good actors, and so they were always trying to find good actors in my rehearsal room, and I would be going to their film set just to hang out, and so many things were happening then. Cloudgate, the contemporary dance troupe, was also doing very mature work, and we also had a renaissance in the pop music field. So things were really happening in Taiwan in the 80s, and our theater was part of it. And so moving away from academia, I created my own theater group called Performance Workshop, and that was, by the way, 40 years ago, 1985. And our first production, which was called That Evening, we performed Crosstalk being an ancient form of stand-up comedy. I don't know in India if you have anything like that, but in China, in the Qing dynasty, like 200 years ago, this form developed where it would be on the street or in tea houses, where just fast-paced comic dialogue between two people, and I guess you don't really relate Chinese people to comedy. I often say we're not very good at comedy, and we're not very good at desserts, but we're good at many things. But there is a kind of comedy called crosstalk, and it had died in Taiwan, and we made this play about its death. Basically, we didn't even talk about reviving it, but it was such a success that it revived this dying tradition. And we made it into, in those days, there were cassette tapes, there were no CDs, there's nothing online, no Apple Music and everything. But we made double cassette of the whole performance, 2 hours, and it sold 1 million sets, believe it or not. And they say that is only 1 million of the official sets, and the pirated editions we're not able to count, but they say there were much more than that. So 40 years ago, we had a great success with my first play, and we've gone on that momentum ever since. And since then, I've written basically a play a year that is performed, produced, and since 1998, I started moving touring into China and then producing in China, and nowadays I have basically two centers of production. One is in Taipei and one is in Shanghai. And I have my own theater in Shanghai called Theater Above, which is a 700-seat theater in the middle of the city. And I'd love for you if you could visit sometime and see one of our works, because that theater is basically dedicated to my works. So in English, I published 12 plays in my own translation called Selected Plays of Stan Lai. And this is from the University of Michigan Press. And yeah, unfortunately, we released that book, that set of books on the day that Putin invaded Ukraine, so it wasn't that auspicious a day. But there it is out there if you're interested in it. And over the years, in the last right now at this moment, I'm in a town called Wuzhen in China, which is like 90 minutes away from Shanghai, where every year we have the Wuzhen Theater Festival. This is something we inaugurated in 2013, and we've had groups from India come in. We love them. They're so creative, and tonight is the opening ceremony for this year's edition, and I have a play performing here also. Unfortunately, we don't have an Indian group here this year, but I hope to get back in touch with all my friends in India to get people to come to the festival here. It's recently been, well, not recently, but over the last 5 or 6 years, people have called it the most important festival in China, at least, and probably in Asia. So I guess in a nutshell, that's been my life. Just continual work as an artist, as a playwright, I direct all my own plays, so it's nonstop. And I direct other people's plays too, so it's even more nonstop. And then this festival and another festival in my father's hometown takes a lot of my energy. So here I am. And my book on creativity, now that's a footnote now, but actually it's very, very important, was published in 2006 in Chinese. And finally, after almost 20 years, I've gotten it into English in my own edition. And it's not a translation. It's a total rewrite of this book that has sold 1 million copies in China and has become sort of the, what would you call it? The linchpin of a there are many universities now that are trying to develop courses in actually whole departments in graduate studies in creativity, and my book now has become the most essential content for the curriculum of these universities. So I'm very happy that the book is in English, and I do think, I always have thought that this book should be doing very well in India, because India itself is so creative, and India needs creativity. And the book itself was the result of my years of teaching as well as doing theater, because all these years, aside from making theater, doing productions, writing plays, directing them, I also taught at, I told you, I taught at the National Institute, which later became the Taipei University of the Arts. And I taught for over 20 years there. And so when I was teaching, I always thought, hey, how can I make my students creative, not more creative? Okay, there's a difference between making someone more creative. That means you already have creativity. Then I can enhance it. But if you don't have it, how do I give it to you? And then I thought, well, my teachers didn't give it to me, and it didn't seem part of their job description, and it wasn't part of my job description. So let's forget it, but it was always in the back of my mind saying, how can I better work for my students and let them really gain access to this thing called creativity? And it was actually in India one year, I believe it was 2001. 2001, I was in India. I was in Bodh Gaya, the place. I'm Buddhist, and so that is a very magical place for me. I've been there many times, and going through Delhi, where you are right now, it's in those days it was very, very difficult to get to Bodh Gaya. You would have to fly to Patna and then hire a car to get you to Bodh Gaya through Gaya, which is quite an adventure. But that year, I was in Bodh Gaya for a Buddhist seminar, and my teachers there were giving very inspiring classes. And one of my friends is a French monk named Mathieu Ricard. He's also a very, very best-selling author. He wrote this book called The Monk and the Philosopher, Dialogues Between Himself and His Father, because he became a Tibetan monk right after getting a PhD from Paris. So he in French society, he's considered a very interesting person. So I was with him in Bodh Gaya, and we were actually on a rickshaw in Bodh Gaya going to see a relic of the Buddha. I'm not sure if it was the Buddha or some saint that was on display. And on that rickshaw, Matthew and I were talking about this ancient concept in Buddhism, where that says that to master the practice of Buddhism, you need two things: you need wisdom and you need method. And of course, that makes sense for anything. I think it makes sense for you to for me to cook, dinner tonight. I need wisdom and I need method to make a good meal. To be a lawyer, to be a businessman, to be an educator, you need both. I mean, you can have an MBA and you know nothing about the wisdom of business. It's not going to get you that far. I really believe that. And suddenly, it came to me, why shouldn't we apply this to creativity? This is what was the missing element to me, is that I suddenly realized everything we teach in university or before or after is in method. In the arts, if you are a music student, you learn piano and the teacher teaches you how to play the piano. That's the method, the fingering, the scales, the notation, everything. Where is the wisdom of the music that needs to be taught to you to be able to play Beethoven, Bach, all these great composers, Mozart? If you don't have the wisdom of music or of Mozart, how can you play Mozart if you have the fingers for Mozart and you don't? You see, that's the same. It's the same with theater. What we do, you can be equipped with all sorts of tools to direct a very snazzy production, but it's not going to stick in the audience's mind unless there is this component called wisdom, which is a knowing. And I suddenly realized that, wow, we're teaching method, but where are we teaching wisdom? Nowhere. There's nowhere. There's no university that I can think of. Cambridge doesn't have, a department of wisdom. And I went to the dictionary, the Webster's dictionary, and I went to wisdom, and it said, wisdom is the quality of being wise. And I went, wait a minute, there's something strange about this. So I checked.
Because then what is wise? What is being wise?
So I checked. I did check wise. I did give it a chance. I gave it a chance, and I checked wise, and wise said characterized by wisdom. So it's like, a loop. I'm going, wow, what happened? And I consulted with my friend who was the head of the philosophy department at Taiwan University. And Professor Ling told me, he said, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I said, what happened? Did we lose wisdom somewhere along the line? Or he said, no. It's just that these days, particularly in democracies, you are not supposed to define what wisdom is, because that's left to the individual to figure out for themselves. And I said, well, if that's the case, then obviously we have failed our obligation to figure out what wisdom is in our life. And Professor Ling told me, actually, it's very tightly related to happiness also. So what do you define as happiness? I think I suddenly thought, wow, we probably have neglected this word for so long that we don't know how to define it anymore, and we are not interested in it anymore, and we don't teach it anymore, and it's gone from our lives. So I set up a sort of a chart, a map, which very simply has method being taught in the domain of art, and wisdom being taught in the domain of life. So you learn wisdom in life, and you learn method in art. And art can be any art, or it can also be any craft, or it can also be what you do. If you're a doctor, then it's your medical studies. That's your art. But to be a great doctor, you obviously you need the wisdom of the human body, of healing, and if you don't have that, you really don't get very far. So that's the gist of my book. And it's it just that I'm just telling you this to open the door, because once that door is open, the questions start flowing out. It's like, so where do we get wisdom? How does wisdom work with method, etc., etc.? And I've been
Absolutely. Let's
talking
go with
too
that.
much.
No, no, no. Let's
I've
go
been
with that.
talking too much.
No, not at all. I'm really listening to you.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
fantastic. You actually, it's the map of creativity, right? That's what it's
Yes, it's the
called.
map that is in my book,
Map of
right? Yeah.
creativity. Yeah.
So over the years, I refined that map to make it actually a path, and I really believe in this path where you really can become creative, and creativity is something that shouldn't be very foreign to us, because we're born with it. The real key is how to connect with it, how to connect with this thing that actually is always there. And this is something that I hope has some connection with your listeners, because it seems like also these are the things you talk about on your podcast.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And my listeners will love listening to everything that you're saying. So, you're talking about wisdom. And so,
Mm.
my first thing is, I've just started studying Buddhist philosophy. I'm embarrassed to even say
Mhm.
it because I'm just baby steps into it. But how does Buddhist philosophy define wisdom? Or rather, how does
Oh,
it
okay.
understand it? Huh.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's a great question, and it's something that really it comes in steps. I don't think there's a simple explanation to wisdom, but it starts with something called a knowing. Okay, so it's an awareness. There's an awareness of a situation, of the world, of yourself, and this is the start of your journey into wisdom. Now, to get deeper, I do have a story that I tell in the book. Is the first time I went to a Tibetan Buddhist teaching. The teacher came in, everybody stood up, and then bowed to the teacher, and then the teacher sat down and said, "Before we start the teaching, please check your motivation for why you are at this teaching tonight." And everyone sat there for 30 seconds in silence, and then said, "Okay, let's start." And for me, that was really weird. I said, "What? What? What? You want me to do what? What? Why do I need to check my motivation for coming to a teaching? I want to learn, right? Is what's wrong with that? So the next time I went to a teaching, a different teacher, exactly the same opening. Please check your motivation. Let us please have the correct motivation for listening to the Buddha's teachings. So take a little moment for that, and then everybody was in silence. And again, I'm sort of rebelling. I'm saying, why are you doing this to me? What is wrong with wanting to learn? And then I started realizing that actually this is a very interesting path to wisdom, which is in a way it's knowing. And it's not only knowing the world, but more, you have to start with yourself. You know yourself, like Socrates said, you have to know yourself. And to know yourself, you have to know why you are doing the things you are doing. And so you say, okay, I want to learn. And then another voice has to come in your mind and say, okay, why do you want to learn? And you say, that's what question, what kind of a question is that? Okay, no, you have to answer it. Okay. why do I have to learn? Because obviously I feel something is not totally, there's something not complete with me. Okay, good. Then why Buddhism? Okay, so then you see the questions start pointing to deeper and deeper. It's you're peeling the onion and you're starting to get into the deeper parts of yourself. And this is, to me, this is a path to wisdom. And to answer your question, I don't think there is one definition of that word. And in the end, you really have to define it for yourself. But to get back to this question from the teacher, this challenge every Tibetan Buddhist teaching, you know, please cultivate the correct motivation. What is the correct motivation? Okay, well, there is an answer in Buddhism, which is that you come to this teaching and you listen to learn for the sake of others, for other so-called sentient beings. In other words, if you come with the selfish motivation of, I want to get something from you, teacher, I want to get some, interesting things that maybe I can learn some voodoo or something like that, and then maybe I can start making money off of it, or I can, record your teaching and sell it, publish it. If that is the case, according to the teachings, the scriptures, you're not going to learn much, because with the wrong motivation, you come to the teaching, you listen, you hear the wrong things. We hear the same words, but they come out differently. And to learn it right, that means you have the wisdom.
That's fantastic. So wisdom does, in a way, according to the dictionary definition, have something to do with being wise, in a way. Eventually.
But what does that mean? What does
Yeah.
being wise mean, right? Yeah. I mean, if
Again, to get
we can
wisdom.
sit there,
Search for
yeah,
wisdom,
we
I
can,
guess.
right. We sit there in meditation and then pretend to be wise. But, are we really wise? What do we know? Really,
Yeah. What do we know?
it's,
Yeah.
what do we know? Yeah.
We don't even know ourselves. We don't even know why we're motivated to do something, right? Yeah.
That's totally right, and that's why I think that this question that we get at the Buddhist teaching is so relevant. Is that we fail to ask ourselves, why are you doing this? Why did I write 40 plays? Isn't that crazy? Why would somebody write 40 plays? If you know how hard it takes to write a play, you would probably just write one and then forget about it. So I have to ask myself that every day as a working writer and director. You see, we're too often just entitled to do that. In modern society, someone is writing a script. Great, oh, someone wrote a song. Wow, you're always, saying that's great. You're being creative. But if you're not asking yourself, why am I doing this? You might be writing something very ignorant or very sophomoric or, very embarrassing. It could in the end be very embarrassing to you.
Absolutely. This reminds me, a couple of years back, I had some time and I thought, let me learn a foreign language. Let me learn
Mm,
Spanish. And my friend who, speaks Spanish pretty well, she told me, ask yourself why you want to learn Spanish particularly.
there you
And I
go.
found it
There
very
you go.
strange. I'm like, I want to learn it. I have time. It looks easy enough. Let me learn it. She's like, no, ask yourself. So it actually made me dig deep and figure out, do I want it? Do I want to travel to Spain? Do I like the sound of so it's an interesting question, one that we really don't ask ourselves why we want to do something.
But if you entertain it, it gets to the heart of exactly. And did you learn Spanish in the end?
I did, not very well, but yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you figured out why you
I
wanted to
figured
do
out
that.
why. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's good. And once you figure out why, you can't go wrong, really.
Yeah, and it
You
actually
learn
acts
it
as a
and
motivator. The Buddhist teacher was right. It motivates you. When you stop, then you remind yourself, this is why I wanted to
right,
do it. So
right.
it's a
Yeah.
good question. So tell
Yeah,
me,
it's
from yeah.
mhm.
I've seen that you've lived in so many countries, and does that give you an outsider's perspective?
Totally. I'm the perfect example of the outsider insider slash. It's like particularly in English speaking countries and Chinese speaking places. It's
Yeah.
like maybe that's a key to understanding me is that I'm very bilingual and very bicultural, and people ask me, are my dreams in English or Chinese? And I, I tell them they're both, uh, and it's like I can, let's say I'm in America, I can be at a NFL football game, and then really enjoying the game. And then suddenly I look at what 80,000 people here in the stadium. What are they doing? Isn't this strange? Everyone has a helmet and they're smashing into each other. What a weird game. You see, so I can be in or out at any moment, or I can be on the streets of Taipei, enjoying some of the best street food, that you can get. And then suddenly, again, I can just suddenly become objective and go, what is everybody doing here? Isn't this strange? How come we're all eating at 11 in the evening, and why are all these vendors open? Et cetera, et cetera. And of course, every time I travel to anywhere, I just enjoy trying to figure out things. India being the great place to figure out things.
Yeah, you visited India several times, you mentioned.
Many times,
Yeah.
yes. Starting in the late 80s. And I think the first time was a great revelation for me, because India taught me, traveling in India in the late 1980s, you have to learn one very important thing, which is you can't plan. You can't plan things. At most, I mean, I can buy a train ticket, right, from Delhi to Calcutta, and then I remember we said, okay, had a we've had a pretty rough time. Let's indulge in a first class sleeper, okay? So we bought tickets for a first class sleeper, which was, I remember, train number 12, and the train came and there were only 11 cars on it.
Yeah, you
So
can
this is
imagine
what I
that.
was saying.
Yeah.
This is the late 80s, and in a way you're frustrated at the time, but there's a greater purpose and message, which is, of course, how can, I mean, we have the illusion that we can plan for everything in life, but that's totally not true. And traveling in India gave me a really great lesson on life, on art, on everything, and it really made me embrace India. And so every time I'm there, I really love it. I spend more of my time up in the north, though, in the up where a lot of my Tibetan teachers are, and this would be in Himachal, in a place
Dharamshala.
called
Yeah.
yeah, in actually Beer is where many of my
Okay.
friends are. Yeah,
Okay.
in Beer, and it's just wonderful to be there, and I enjoy it so much. I enjoy India as a place where you must enjoy all the things that you're not used to, and everything that is different. And in a way, that is such a teaching, because we get so, obsessed with the way we do things and the way we are, that we really need to be knocked out of our heads sometimes and say, no, sorry, this is not the way people do things in different places, and you have to understand that.
Absolutely. For me, I remember the first time I was just mentioning it to a friend yesterday, so I remember now. I was just saying when
Mm-hmm,
I first time I traveled out of India, I remember
mm-hmm.
looking out of a train and just seeing these vast expanses, and I'm like, where are the people? Because in India you
Good
have people
question.
everywhere, so it was so
Yeah,
strange
yeah.
for me. Do you
Well,
feel that, coming from China and
I
being,
feel that, oh, China, yeah, there's no place where there's no people. Very, very few places have no people. And usually there's crowds of people. But things like, just in my experience, I don't think this happens anymore, but let's say you check into a flight, right? And you have two luggage. Then when you get on the plane, before you get on the plane, you have to go to the luggage. Luggage is lying on the ground out there. And you have to go out there and you have to point to your luggage and say, yes, this is my luggage. And then they put it on the plane. I don't know if I've never experienced that anywhere in the world. And I don't know if they do that anymore. I don't think so.
yeah,
But
even
I don't
we
know
have
if
to
you
do
remember
that
that.
because it's an entire conveyor belt and there's so much luggage, and some of it looks like your own. So,
No, no, no. You're
yeah.
saying when you're collecting it. I'm saying when you
Oh,
put it
okay.
in.
Yeah, that happens in a few
Yeah.
places. Yeah, for security
Okay.
reasons in some places, but not everywhere.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right, 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 right. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun.
A lot of fun, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that you take for granted, really. So tell me, Stan, I want to hear from you, because we've talked about your influences and all that, and you've written like nearly 40 plays. So what are your plays about? I mean, I'd like to know from you.
My plays are about the experience, I guess, of being Chinese in this day and age, and starting from Taiwan, and then very, very special experiences because, particularly my parents' generation, they were so displaced. It's like when I was a kid growing up in Taiwan and seeing all these, there were 2 million people who came from China to Taiwan within a year. That's like one of the greatest odysseys of all time. And many of my parents' friends were, they were dressed very smartly and, very chic and everything. But you always knew that there's something very sad behind, because everyone that we knew, they had come from somewhere where they could not go back to. So they were not able to go home, and they were not able to learn anything about what was happening in their homeland. And this is the story of my parents' generation, which winds up in a lot of my plays. One of them called The Village, one called Secret Love in Peach Blossom Land, which is probably my most well-known work. And actually, it's still performing today, and it's going to be 40th anniversary next year. So my recent play, if you ask me, tomorrow night we're going to be performing in Wuzhen. It's called "Flower in the Mirror, Moon in the Water," and that's a Buddhist phrase, sort of reflecting on the illusory quality of life. And it's about two girls who want to take revenge for their mother's death. And so it sounds like it's a revenge play, but it's not, because in the end, uh, when they're young, they're able to communicate with all these mythical beasts and creatures that come from Chinese mythology. And then when they grow older, they lose this ability and they even forget about all these beasts who are their friends. And then it's their whole journey of their life from 10 years old to 70 years old. So in the end, you see what happens. And basically, the revenge moment only comes in the middle. So it's like most revenge plays they end with a revenge, but my play sort of, the life just starts after you have accomplished the most important thing in your life. And so what do you have left to look forward to, basically? And that's going to happen tomorrow night here in Wuzhen.
All the best for it. And are
Thank
there
you.
other
Thank
plays
you.
available in English?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, the 12 of my plays, Secret Love in Peach Blossom Land is one of them. The Village headlines the second volume. And then perhaps my most, I don't, let's call it my longest play. It's called A Dream Like a Dream, is 8 hours long. And it's in the third volume. And it's, people come out of that play and say, that was 8 hours. That it seems so short. It's because it really, you get in there. There's a spell to that play that you just get into, and you don't come out until it's. Of course, there are 3 intermissions in the middle, so it's totally humane. But I really think that many artists, directors, actors would be very interested in that play called A Dream Like a Dream. And in that third volume, there's another play that's 5.5 hours called A Go. And it actually takes place in India. The third act takes place in Sikkim. And so it's a quest for what is called the Pure Land in Buddhism, which is a place that many countries have this kind of mythology where it's like you have this perfect place where nobody suffers anything. And of course, in this day and age, people are suffering so much, they long for a place like that. And so these people who actually are uh, ethnically, I don't exactly say what they are, but obviously they're Tibetan or Tibetan from China. And then they have calamity, and then they go to America and they have further calamity. And so they all decide to see if they can find this pure land in India. So there you go. My connection with India, I think, is very, very strong. And that's why I do hope that my book does catch on there.
Could you tell me what the play is about?
Ago?
Not a go, the other one, a dream in a dream.
A Dream Like a Dream. Okay,
A
A Dream
dream
Like
like
a
a dream. Yeah.
Dream, yes, is about it starts the whole conceit of why you need an 8 hour play is that to understand a person's life, you actually have to go through the lives of other people. So if I really wanted to know Anuradha, your life, then in the middle I would have to cut into someone else's life and then really go through all of their life and then cut into someone else's life. So the main character is called patient number 5. He doesn't have a name, but he's come down with an undiagnosable illness, terminal, which is something I saw in the New York Times one day. And I said, what? How? I mean, if there's a terminal disease, you usually know what it is, and you may have some way to figure out how you got it, but to be undiagnosable means there's no way to understand why you got it. And so he goes on a quest to understand his fate. And then this goes into he's from starts in Taiwan, and then he goes to France, and then he learns things, and he comes back to Shanghai, then he learns things. And then the story in the second half is about this woman in Shanghai in the 1930s. So you see, you're moving from continents and places. Actually, I must tell you that the inspiration for this whole play, which I write about in detail in the book Creativitry, happened in India also at Bodh Gaya. So the real majestic place of inspiration for me is Bodh Gaya, India. And why? Because I personally think the most creative act in the history of mankind happened there when Shakyamuni Buddha became enlightened, and he actually figured out the truth of what's going on in this crazy world. So I always think that place. I don't know if have you been there. It's
Many years ago.
so
Yeah.
special.
Yeah.
It's so special. There's a real energy there, and that energy is you can actually feel it, And so I actually got the inspiration for A Dream Like a Dream in one moment. That's why I explain it in the book. It's a good it's a good example for creative inspiration because it comes from me, the artist himself, and so you don't have to go through any secondary, documents or anything. I'm just telling you what happened to me, and it all came to me. This very, very, very complex and detailed inspiration came to me in 1 second, and all these stories about this woman in Shanghai, this patient with an undiagnosable disease, his doctor, this woman in Paris, blah, 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 all these people I could trace to certain events or memories in my life. But these people didn't know each other before they came into my mind as an inspiration. You see, that is the real magic of creativity, is that you can think of a cousin, and then you can think of a friend who has nothing to do with the cousin, and then maybe they have a story that suddenly has a spark there, and you have a beautiful story, And this is what happened with A Dream Like a Dream. So basically, you're moving into the stories of different people, and when you come out again, you come back. It's like you go deep into, and then it's like these boxes you go into, and then you come out again, and you start understanding what happened to each person. And at the end, it's sort of a grand revelation that uh, many people want to see more than once, believe it or not. And there's a club in China that has people who have seen A Dream Like a Dream 10 times, and they share their they share their visions of the play. Yeah, and we perform it every year.
That's beautiful. Any chance that we get to see it in India sometime?
I would love it, but it's not easy to produce. Finally, someone is producing in America this year. In November at MIT, there will be a production. Come to Shanghai and see it with English subtitles in January or February. This usually is when we perform. But reach out to your theatrical friends, and I'd be very happy to assist in any way, or even go and direct the play in India. I would love
Well,
it.
I hope it
I really would
happens.
love it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to tell you that there's a very special way of staging this play. And that is, in a normal theater, you have the audience and then you have the performers. Like, it's called a proscenium. It's, in other words, face to face, right? But in A Dream Like a Dream and in A Go, and this also was inspired by being in India, you are sitting in the middle, in the center, and you are on a swiveling chair. And so all of the action is moving around you. So the whole play swivels around you for 8 hours. And I think that is something it's an inspiration I got while just sitting by the stupa in Bodh Gaya and just watching the humanity flowing around. And it all goes in one direction. If you move in the opposite direction, everyone goes, you're not a real pilgrim, right? But everything goes in one direction. And while I was writing the outline for the play next to the stupa, this is the inspiration I got. I said, this play has to be staged in this way. And so I sort of invented this way of staging where you're sitting in the middle and everything is moving around you. So if a scene starts here in front of you, everyone is watching this way. And then the next scene will open up to you on your right. And so everyone turns. And then you're watching the next scene while people are moving around you. So I think it's very Indian. It's very, very Indian.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Really. You've almost taken me to the center of it.
All
Yeah.
right. You
Yeah.
bring it to Delhi. You bring it to Delhi.
Yeah. You see, you've given me motivation.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So tell me, what you're saying that in an instant, this entire thing came to you, when you were in Bodh Gaya. So this creative
Right.
process we talk about, it's that instant, it's spontaneous. So how, like in your book and your work now is about, inspiring creativity, teaching creativity even, right?
Right.
So can it be
Yes.
taught? Because, when we grow up also, we're like, okay, this one is creative and this one is more intellectual, and we choose our paths that way, right?
Right.
So how does that work?
Oh, you definitely you read the book and you will understand that definitely you can learn this thing because you have it already. It's just that we blocked it. Since childhood we've blocked our own creativity. And actually life itself is the thing that really holds us in. So what happens is, actually, as children you're told to do this and that and everything. One example I have in the book is very simple. Is one day I was walking on the streets of Shanghai, and then this woman was walking toward me with her son, probably around 5 years old. And the son suddenly pointed to the sky. It was a beautiful sky. And he said, "Mama, look at the dog." And what happened later was rather cruel because she actually hit him. And she said, "That's a cloud." Okay. So, wow, I was devastated, but I didn't know these people. So I couldn't say, "Hey, you can't do that to your son." And they walked away, and that was the last I saw them. But I sighed and I said, "Oh, there goes another. There's another person's creativity is gone. This boy will never see dogs in the sky again." And that's actually very sad. So this is what happens. This is just a small example of how when we grow up, we do that to our kids too, and so it's like a never-ending cycle of destroying our own creativity. And how do we get it back? And I talk about something which I talk about in very contemporary terms of nurturing an app, an app, a creative app inside you. And this app basically is something that helps you clear your mind, because creativity happens in space. You need space. Without space, nothing, even if you're cooking, right? You want to mix flour together with the oil. You need space, right? If you can't do that, then you can't make your naan tonight, right? So you're right. If you want to cook rice, you need to put the rice in the water in something, right? So you need the space. If that space is cluttered, like our minds are like streaming all these, radio stations, a million of them at a time. Our minds are incredible. We can do so much, but how can we start turning off those channels and be quiet? Because once you're really quiet, wow, that empty mind can contain anything. And that's when inspiration comes and occupies the mind. And it's something you can try. You can start nurturing, you can start developing this sort of a mindset. But the first thing you need to do is probably the best path to do it is meditation. So through meditation, then you can start quieting the mind. Because, I mean, look at all the artists of the world. We do our art in quietude. I mean, nobody does art, with a crazed mind and full mind of all sorts of distractions. You can't do art. You have to be quiet.
Yeah. But tell me, the first question people would ask, because, in our generation, in the world we live in today, everybody's chasing success, right?
Yes.
So why
Yes.
should one chase creativity in the first place? Why would one be inspired? Because everything
Okay.
has to have a benefit, right? In Buddhism, you learn that because, we're drawn to things and we get attached because something gives us
Yeah.
benefit, right? So what is the
You said it.
benefit?
You said it.
Yeah.
Well, that had there are two answers to this. The first goes back to that word wisdom. So what and motivation. So what motivates you? And to put it simply, if you are like me, if you're a playwright, then why are you motivated to write this play? And motivation there's a whole spectrum of motivation, from being, I want to make 10 million rupees, that's a motivation. Okay. Or I'm going to write the greatest play ever written. Okay. Now, how can those two be reconciled? We probably can't. Okay. But whatever you choose, that then becomes the path that you take. The motivation brings you there. So you can have a masterpiece that made 10 million rupees for you. And then people will say, oh, it made 10 million rupees. And you are very offended because you think it's artistic masterpiece because that was your motivation in the first place. So that's one aspect of it. Now, the second aspect, basically, I do have a story also about another child that I met in Zurich, actually. The parents were very good business people who were running a few Chinese restaurants there. And I just met them, so I didn't know these people. But I went to their house, and the boy was very artistic and loved to draw. But the parents, again, very cruel, they bound his hands whenever he wanted to draw something. Can you believe it? I mean, it's like, how could they do that? And again, I didn't know these people well, so I didn't know how to talk to them. But suddenly I found a way. I said, why are you doing that? And the mother told me, because he's going to be a businessman. He's going to take over the family business. He's going to be very successful. I said, how do you know that? And she said, because that's what we do, and we're very good at it, And I said, oh, okay. I don't know how to explain this to you, but how about this? Do you know who makes the most money these days? And she said, who? I said, check it out. A lot of artists make a lot of money. For what I know, they stopped binding their son's hand after that. And I don't know what happened to him. That was many years ago, but I do wish them well. But there you see, it's like, you can say someone wants to be creative because it's so lucrative. But then you can say, what? Not everybody is Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs, extremely creative person, right? But then not everybody, even if you want to be a doctor or you want to be a business manager, there's also no guarantee of your success, I must say. So that's the way I would approach your question.
Yeah. So then why be creative? For the sake of creativity, it gives you happiness. It helps you in every area of life. I'm asking a very practical question.
No, it's a
Uh,
great question. It's a wonderful question. It's like the question of all questions, really, because what I say in the book is really that we do feel entitled to all these things, but we never ask ourselves why. And often we get very bad results. I remember one of my students, playwriting students, she wrote an outline for a play, and I said, what is this? This is talking about this miserable guy, and there wasn't much of a story. It was just all about this lousy guy. And she said, I'm writing about my ex-boyfriend, you know, and yeah, I want everyone to know how terrible a person he was. And I said, well, who is it for? Who do you really think it's for? He says, for him. He has to see this play. And then I said, then do I need to see the play? Can I not see it, please?
Good question. Yeah.
You see, there you go. It's
Yeah.
like motive. Yeah. So in the end, you need to check the motivation. That becomes the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, I believe your book also, I mean, it's not available yet in India. I checked, it's available for pre-order. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
great. We're moving there. But tell me,
Moving there, right?
apparently you also have exercises there
Yes, I
to
do.
encourage
Yes,
creativity. So could you give us
yes.
something?
Well, the exercises are there for you to sort of like review things that are in the chapters, and some of the stuff is maybe easy, and some of it may be a little more difficult. So that's why, for instance, I tell you what, like Steve Jobs, who we just mentioned, he said once that creativity is just connecting things, and that's my little theory, is that creativity starts with just A plus B, meaning like let's say this cup that I have in my hand, and then this microphone I'm talking into. Can we make this into a microphone? You see, that's creativity. It's very, of course, it's pretty lousy. I don't think anybody would want a microphone that looks like this, but you never know. So in the end, that chapter, I would have you making sort of different types of A plus B, and then you start to understand, oh, so it's that easy, but it's also that hard.
Yeah, you're looking in places where, you never looked at before, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and it's forcing you to sort of connect things. If we're talking about connecting things being creativity, then I'm going to force you to connect that. And in the book, I also talk about like a glass, and then your coffee, and then and the book you're reading. How do you combine those? I mean, it's like, could it possibly be? I mean, and this is just flexing A plus B. Can a cup of coffee? Can you drink a cup of coffee and then you've read a book?
Wow.
So, yeah. So
Uh,
like War and Peace, boom, and then now I read it. So who knows? In the future, who knows what people will dream up,
Yeah,
right?
fascinating.
I, I remember the first time I saw a smartphone that had a camera on it. I said, "This is the dumbest thing that anybody could invent." What? I mean, how can you take a photo while you're on the phone?
Yeah.
So that shows you how much I know, right?
Yeah, no, no.
But
I
that's
remember like growing up in the 80s and all that, I remember people saying that one day there'll be video cameras on phones. And I was like, oh, come on, what nonsense. I mean, I'll have to dress up every time there's a call, you know? I mean, I couldn't visualize it. Like getting ready
yeah,
each time
yeah.
somebody calls you, and now it's like so
This is
commonplace.
how foolish is that, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But
So,
that shows you how much we know,
yeah, and a lot of
and who
creative
knows,
minds around doing all this,
right?
making
And
all this possible.
I who knows who invented that thing, whether they really understood the impact of a photo and a video camera inside a phone.
Yeah, and so I just want to ask you, like, I mean, it's like a twin question. First of all, can theater inspire creativity and maybe make, youngsters should get more into that, or even older
Hmm.
people? There's no
Hmm.
age really for anything. And the other thing, any collaborators from India, because you said for your festival, you've had a lot of people visiting from India. So, any people that you've been in touch with that you could mention?
Not in recent years. I remember about when we first started the festival. We have, yes, we have some friends in Delhi, and then in the south. Yeah, I don't have their contacts right now. I'll
Okay.
see if I can find them, and then I
No,
have
no,
your
sure.
email,
I
so I
just wanted
can send them
to
to you. Yeah,
generally don't
yeah,
want to miss that bit out in case,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was
yeah,
somebody you were in
yeah.
touch with. Yeah.
Right. Right.
But do you think theater is good for creativity? Maybe people should do a little more theater. How does that help?
Oh, theater is great for many things, not just creativity, but because it is a teamwork, and so leadership qualities, and then improvisational qualities, and acting, and just being able to present yourself in before people, and then all the creative stuff that comes, around that. It's really, I really, I mean, of course, I've done theater all my life, so of course I recommend it. But this is truly, I do have a training program in Shanghai, and we train kids as well as adults. And we don't train them to become professional actors. We train them for the process really enriches them in their own lives.
Yeah, and this whole thing which you read about, that yes and, right, for improv.
Hmm.
So I guess that also
Yes,
opens up things in your brain, I suppose.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I forgot to ask you this, what got you interested in theater and, leading your life in a creative way? Like, I think that can be a great way to end the podcast.
Okay, it's quite by accident, because I was very interested in very creative things since I was a kid. It's like I love to draw, I love music, I love literature. I got into college as an English major, which means that I could basically skip classes because my English is, and so of course the literature part was very important for me, but I had no theater in my life. I wasn't able to see any plays growing up in Taipei at the time, and so I thought that all of my interests, including music, I was playing a lot of music at the time, art, poetry, all these interests of mine, film, they could be put together into this one thing called theater. That's what I thought. Actually, when I got started to get training in it, I realized that that is not the case. I mean, theater may seem to be a combination of all these things, but in the end, theater is theater. It has its own aesthetics, its own training, and it all has to do more with psychology and actually philosophy more than the arts. So all of my interests, like in music and in art and poetry, in the end, maybe after a decade of working, they kick in and they help you in your creativity. But to start with, in the theater, it really doesn't matter where you come from. In the end, you have to learn about theater on its own terms.
Thank you. Any message finally for listeners?
Well, I really hope that you can be inspired by my book and my plays. I really feel very close to India. My daughter spent a lot of time in India and met her husband there, and her husband is from Bhutan, and he's a filmmaker, Pao Choning Dorji, quite well known now. So they were married in beer. So India is very close to my heart, and we always love to travel to India, and I would love it even more if someone were producing a play of mine there. And so I hope to someday see my work being done in India. I think
I hope
it
so
would.
too. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think
Thank you.
it will resonate. I think it really will. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope to see a dream like a dream sometime.
Oh, I hope you can see it, and I hope you see it in Delhi. Okay?
Yeah, yes, that would be perfect.
That would be
Thanks so
perfect.
much,
Yeah.
Stan, for doing this.